Hi, my name is Katie Morgan, and welcome to Conversations with the Void, the series where, actually, you know what? Let's talk about that. Hi there, my name is Katie Morgan. I am an indie fantasy author and fiction editor, and welcome to Conversations with the Void, the series where instead of shouting into the void, we attempt to have a conversation with it. In other words, we're going to be talking about the creative process, its ups and downs, and trying to remember that we're not actually alone in this, even if it sometimes feels like we are. Today I want to talk about something I really should have started this series with, given its name, and that is, how do you keep creating when it feels like nobody's listening, when it feels like you really are shouting into the void? I think this is a really important topic, both for people who are creating just for fun and for people who are creating as part of their business. If you are creating for fun, I think it's probably a safe bet that you are a human being who likes to connect with other human beings and who likes to create and have other folks enjoy what you're creating. And if you're creating for profit, you have all of that, and you kind of need people to be paying attention to you and your work because you need them to pay you so that you can pay rent. Unfortunately, I think the conversations we tend to have around listening and being listened to in this context are not super helpful, so maybe we should start with a definition. According to Merriam-Webster, listen is a verb, and it has a variety of definitions, but the one we're going to focus on is to hear something with thoughtful attention, give consideration. I think it's that thoughtful attention and consideration that kind of throw people. Like, is it okay to even ask for that? And what would that even look like? And of course, as I mentioned, I think the conversations around this are kind of simplistic. So let's dig into that a little bit. What's wrong with the conversation? So when people talk about listening in this context, they usually bring up two ideas that are kind of in opposition with each other. One idea is that you should stop needing anyone else. You should create for the joy of creating and stop waiting for external validation. And that is good advice, but it's not super helpful when you're sitting there listening to crickets after you've posted an excerpt from a piece of writing that you're really excited about. I actually did a whole video on validation and why it's not a super great idea to rely solely on internal validation rather than external validation. I will actually put a link to that somewhere in the cards so you can check it out if you're curious. The other idea that usually comes up when we're talking about feeling like no one is paying attention or listening when you're sharing your work is this idea of marketing. So there must be something wrong with the way you're marketing, the way you're putting your work out there, and who you're reaching and who you're not reaching. And so it's now on you to find the right audience, try a new marketing tactic, spend lots of money, just approach the thing in a different manner. And again, this isn't bad advice, but it can be super exhausting, especially if you are in the situation where you're not quite sure what approach works yet. So how do we get people to listen? How do we have a healthy conversation with the void? I think the real answer is somewhere between those two conversation topics. How to converse with the void. First, I think it's really important to confront the gremlin in your head that says no one cares about your work and you should just give up. You need to be asking questions like, do you care about your work? Do you enjoy the act of creating? Are you creating in a way that is heartfelt and authentic to you and to your goals? I think sometimes the conversation stops here, like just believe in yourself and everything will be fine. And I think we do need to go further than that, but I think this is a really good place to start. The second thing to consider is, who do you think should be listening? So who is your ideal reader? Who are you trying to reach with your work? And also, where do these people hang out? This is really important if you are trying to sell your work, but it's also really important in terms of creating community and finding other folks who are creating in a similar way to what you're doing. If you're part of a community, it sometimes feels a little bit less like you're shouting into the void because you know there are other folks who are going through what you're going through, and so they're interested in some of the same things. It's also useful for those times when you feel like you're not getting a lot of feedback because you can take a step back and think, okay, the people who are not responding, maybe they're not responding because they're not the right people, and I should keep trying to focus on finding the right people. So in marketing, this is often referred to as coming up with a persona or an ideal reader, but I think it can also be even simpler than that. Maybe you're someone who's just writing fan fiction for fun, and so your goal is to find people who are into that fandom. The idea is just to try to be clear about who you're trying to reach so you can make sure you're in the right places to have those conversations you want to be having. And the third thing to consider is, what are you creating and what kind of impact are you trying to have with it? So that might be things like, what is the message you're conveying with this piece and why does it matter to you? And also, why should it matter to someone else? This is kind of a marketing thing, but it also gets you thinking about intention. So maybe you're feeling a little bit isolated right now, like you're not quite getting the feedback you want, but you know the ultimate theme, the ultimate goal of what you're creating, and so that can kind of help you move forward, even if right now things aren't going so well. Conclusion. So I do think you should be creating for the sake of creating, but I also don't think it's a bad thing to want people to engage with your work and to love your work. It really sucks when you feel like you're doing this all alone, but I also think a lot of people feel that way, so we should be reaching out to each other. If you are feeling that sense of isolation, like you are putting your work out into the world and nobody cares, there are sometimes some things that you can do, such as studying marketing. But sometimes you just have to wait. Sometimes it's about luck, and sometimes it just takes time. I really, really wish there were a silver bullet for this situation because I hate that feeling of being isolated and feeling alone in this process, like nothing you create matters and you're shouting into a void. And like when you do try to share your work, you're just being very self-centered and it's silly and no one cares. But I think we need to remember that these are really normal, very common feelings to have. And so we really need to do our best to support the rest of the creative community when we're feeling this way. I really hope that the things I talk about on this channel can help you feel less alone, and I really hope that you are able to find ways to share your work and create community around it. But it's really important to remember that even if stuff isn't working out right now, that doesn't mean that it will never work out. Keep creating, keep trying, and keep having conversations with the void. The void really is listening, even if it doesn't seem like it right now. So, comments are open. Please tell us a little bit about what you are working on, and if you are in a situation where you feel like you're shouting into a void, tell us about it and maybe we can have a conversation. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe for more on the creative process. And if you really can't get enough, you might want to sign up for my monthly author newsletter. I talk a lot more about the creative process and creative community in that newsletter. And when you sign up, you'll get a free short story set in the world of the Compound series. What is the Compound series, you ask? It is my contemporary fantasy trilogy featuring a cranky empath, a slew of magical conspiracies, and a little bit of queer romance. You can find out more about it and my author newsletter in the information below. That's it for this episode of Conversations with the Void. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.